and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be doing a fun kind of video and I'm going to be talking about potential Game of Thrones prequels. Now, I have been thinking that Game of Thrones are going to be doing a prequel for a while now, and I know I'm not alone in that thought. HBO are going to want to keep making as much Game of Thrones stuff as possible. It's a big moneymaker, it's a global phenomenon, and let's be real, they're going to want to keep hitting that cash cow, milking that cash cow as much as they possibly can. So I would be super shocked if they didn't start rolling out prequels, rolling out ideas for prequels when season 8 rolls around. So I have two possible candidates for prequels. They're like the main ones I think are in contention, but I'm also going to talk about a few other ideas. Now, I love the idea of them doing a prequel just because it means more Game of Thrones. It means we get more background into history, because at the moment we don't have any history from the books. We literally just have what George R. R. Martin tells us, what he includes in the books now and then. We don't know the full history. There are so many questions left unanswered, so I think it'd be amazing if those could be answered in the form of a prequel. So yeah, let's just jump right in. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, requests, comment below and I will get back to you. Also, I have two things I would ask you to comment below. Number one, comment what you think the prequel might be and kind of comment what you'd like the prequel to be. And number two, I'm considering diversifying my channel just a little bit. The Walking Dead comes back in a couple of weeks and it is one of my favorite shows by far. Not as much as Game of Thrones, but I still love it. I wondered whether you guys would be interested in me doing episode reviews, maybe talking about theories for it. The channel would still be primarily Game of Thrones. I was just thinking about doing something a bit different. Comment below if you'd be interested in that, because if that isn't a consensus, then I won't bother doing it. You know, the most important thing about this channel is you guys watch, you guys, listen to me. Otherwise it'd just be me talking at a computer screen like some crazy lady. So let me know whether you'd be interested in that. Okay, so I have, like I said, two main ideas for a prequel, and then a few others I will just touch on. So the first one is the most obvious, and that is Robert's Rebellion. Now, Robert's Rebellion was the events that happened just before the books started. Well, there was like a 17-year gap, but it was the most previous takeover of the throne, shall we say, before season 1 and before the books. So Robert's Rebellion was when Jon Arryn and Robert Baratheon and Ned Stark called their banners and went to war with Rhaegar and the Mad King. Now let's go back a little bit and talk about how it actually happened. So the Mad King had been in charge for a while. The start of his reign was great. Tywin Lannister was basically in charge, and he was a very, very good ruler. You know, he ensured that the economy grew, he ensured there was no rebellions, and he was very good at his job. But later down the line, Aerys realised that Tywin was a bit too good at his job, and most people had the same consensus that was the truth, that Tywin Lannister ran the Seven Kingdoms, not King Aerys. So there were a ton of insults King Aerys ended up doing to Tywin, assigning Jaime to the Kingsguard, refusing a betrothal between Cersei and Rhaegar, that caused Tywin to leave his post in insult. And it turns out King Aerys was not good at ruling the kingdom. He was extremely bad at it. He didn't really know what he was doing, and soon enough he was known as the Mad King. He started to descend into being crazy. You know, he burned people alive, he mistreated his wife, he was not a good ruler, and he was a very bad, evil man. So Rhaegar had this plot to overthrow his father. He planned at the tourney of Harrenhal to meet with all of the other major lords and discuss dethroning his father so he could take his place. However, King Aerys found out about this and showed up at the tourney, kind of ruining those plans. So Rhaegar was unable to unseat him, and that kind of fractured the relationship between Rhaegar and King Aerys. Now, that isn't what led to rebellion. What led to rebellion was Prince Rhaegar capturing Lyanna Stark. So he captured her, allegedly, and that threw the country into war. She was betrothed to Robert Baratheon, so Robert Baratheon had to respond. He also did love Lyanna, and so he wanted to respond. Brandon Stark and Rickard Stark, they went to King's Landing and they stormed into the Red Keep and demanded to see Prince Rhaegar. They wanted to know where Lyanna was, they wanted to know what he'd done with her, and they were pretty riled up. Unfortunately, King Aerys answered to them that Rhaegar was not there and took it as a huge insult that they dared call out the crown prince. King Aerys then tortured and murdered them, and war was completely inevitable. So Jon Arryn, who was fostering Robert Baratheon and Ned Stark, called his banners. They called the banners of the North, the Tullys, and the Vale and the Stormlands, and went to war. As we know, Robert Baratheon was successful, and the Lannisters eventually joined the fray, and Jaime killed the Mad King. I think it's just such a rich storyline. I think there's so much they could do with it. You know, they could do kind of the start of the rebellion, they could do the tourney at Harrenhal, they could do the kind of Mad King's reign for a little bit. Then they could go into the rebellion, then they could go into Robert Baratheon overthrowing the Targaryens. We could see the Lannisters, we could see Jaime killing the Mad King, and then we could maybe end with Robert climbing the steps of the Iron Throne. I think it would be so interesting. There's so much to do with it. The thing with a prequel is they have to have substantial enough stuff to do. They can't pick one battle that would last one season or a couple of episodes. They have to pick something that they can really kind of get their teeth into and do a lot on. I think Robert's Rebellion would be perfect. There's the Rhaegar Lyanna love story, there's the battles itself, there's the overthrow of the Targaryen dynasty, there's all kind of inter-house politics and the royal family, so I think it would be so good to do. It is also the most obvious. I think it's one of the kind of clearest to be picked because there is so much they could do, and because it's the one that interests people the most, I would say, because it's been mentioned in the show a lot of times, it's been spoke about in the books a ton. So I think it would be really successful, and it would be the one I would vote for. That is personally the one I would like to see the most. Okay, so for me, the second most possible candidate is probably Aegon the Conqueror's story. So, self-explanatory, Aegon conquered the Seven Kingdoms. So he came in, he was basically living, this is why I love having this map. Look how I can refer to him. It's great. Okay, a little bit of history lesson. I'm going to shuffle so I can tell you. Okay, so over here we have the broken up Valyrian Peninsula. The Targaryens fled there due to Daenerys the Dreamer. She was a prophet. She had a prophecy that Valyria was going to be doomed. He landed here in his conquest. This is Dragonstone here. So he landed here and then proceeded to go into the Seven Kingdoms to conquer them. So it was a historic event, you know. The Seven Kingdoms had always been independent. All of the kings fell. So before Aegon the Conqueror, each region was administered by a king and was administered independently. So in the north you had the Starks, in the Vale you had the Arryns, in the Riverlands you had House Hoare, in the Westerlands you had the Lannisters, in the Reach you had the Gardeners, in the Stormlands you had the Durrandons, and then in the Dawn you had the Martells. So each area was ruled independently. Aegon the Conqueror came in and took over 6 kingdoms. He could not take over Dawn. Dawn later would become officially part of the Seven Kingdoms through a marriage alliance. So I think it'd be super interesting to see that on screen. We get to see him going through each of the kingdoms. We would get to see him kind of trying to take everywhere over. It would be really interesting to me. Now, as you heard when I was saying who ruled each kingdom, they're not the same as who rules each kingdom now, and that's for a reason. Some of them didn't bend the knee to Aegon the Conqueror, some of them were destroyed later on, but I think it would be so interesting to see kind of the original rulers of each kingdom, to see who ruled there, what laws they had, how they administered their region, and then we can see Aegon the Conqueror going to war with his sister wives. We can see him taking over, and we can kind of see how he did it. I think that would be so interesting. He was the original king of Westeros. You know, he built the Iron Throne, melted down swords from his enemies to build it. He has such a rich history. It really starts the Targaryen dynasty, so I think it would be such an interesting thing. And again, there is a wealth of information that they could use. You know, they could easily stretch that out to, you know, you could even go as far as doing like 1 kingdom per season. Maybe not quite that slow, but see what I'm saying? There's a lot they could do with it. Okay, so for me, those are my 2 main candidates for a prequel. I think they have the most wealth of information. I think they are 2 of the most interesting events. There are other things they could do, and I will briefly touch on them, but for me, those are the 2 most likely, and the 2 I'd most like to see. Little bit of biased. Okay, so they could easily do the First Men invasion. Before the Children of the Forest fractured the arm of Dawn, Dawn was actually connected to Essos here, and the First Men basically marched in that way and took over the continent. The Children of the Forest stopped any further invasion by fracturing the arm of Dawn. They also tried to fracture the neck, which is why it's all marshlands now, because they failed, but just kind of made the area really bad to live in and really uninhabitable. So I think it'd be really interesting to see the invasion of the First Men. We could kind of see Westeros in its day and age when there was no King's Landing, there was no Winterfell, it was all just trees and forest, and we could see a lot more of the Children of the Forest, their lore, and we'd be able to see the creation of the White Walkers. I think that'd be amazing. So I think that'd be one really interesting thing to see. They could do the Long Night when White Walkers took over the continent. The Long Night was about 8,000 years ago. The White Walkers, after being made by the Children of the Forest, completely took over. And it's really interesting as well, because not only did they take over all of Westeros, I'm going to lean out even more, They took over Essos as well. There are stories about them invading from the Shadowlands and kind of Essos going through similar struggles. So we could get a little bit more information as well on how that happened. How were the White Walkers in two places at once? Is there an area in Essos where the White Walkers are hiding now? Could it be a threat to both continents? So I think any of those two as well would tell us a lot about the histories of the continents, would tell us a lot about, you know, the White Walkers, the Children of the Forest, the original people who lived there. And again, I think it would be harder because George R. R. Martin would have to be directly involved to do it. But I think it would be so interesting, and I think it would be done really, really well. Okay, so that's all I have today, guys. Kind of a few prequel ideas. Again, comment below with your own ideas for prequels. I'd love to hear if you have any. And I will be back next week with another theory video. I cannot wait until the trailers start rolling out. For every trailer, I will be doing detailed analysis. I will be breaking them down. I'll be talking about all those kind of things. Keep an eye out for those. But for now, I'm just going to be talking about, you know, fun videos with a mixture of theories and histories. So if you're not already, please subscribe. And I will see you soon, guys. Bye! We could see.
Where is Dragon City on the map?
There isn't a Dragon City.
Wait, no, I thought there was actually a Dragon City.
There's not a Dragon City.
Is there something close to Dragon City?
There's Dragonstone.
Dragon Village?
There's Dragonstone.